The glass slipped from my father's hand before I even said a word. Champagne splattered across the polished floor and every conversation died. He was standing under the Navy banner medals, flashing under the light, calling my stepsister, Commander Anya Petrova, my pride, my legacy. And then he saw me standing at the back of the hall wearing the real badge. For a second, the man who once taught me that honor was sacred looked like he didn't recognize his own daughter. His voice cracked through the silence. Who authorized that rank? No one breathed. I didn't answer because the truth didn't need his permission anymore. That was the night everything broke: the pride, the bloodline, and the lie my father built his entire career on. My name is Mara Rostova, and this is the story of how I made the Navy remember what honor really means. I thought I'd grown numb to Navy ceremonies, the polished brass, the rehearsed speeches, the way applause pretended to measure worth. But that night, as I stepped into the Washington Navy Yard, I realized I wasn't walking into a ceremony. I was walking into a performance my father had directed to perfection. They called him Admiral Viktor Rostov, a man carved from steel and legacy, a living symbol of command. To the world, he was honor personified. To me, he was the man who had never once looked at me with pride in his eyes. On stage, Anya stood in her immaculate whites, her smile fixed in the golden light. The announcer's voice boomed the youngest commander in the fleet. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Every head turned toward her, radiant beneath the weight of borrowed glory. I stood at the back in uniform unnoticed. The bright yellow glow from the chandeliers bathed her in warmth, but the pale blue light spilling from the open door washed over the silver badge on my shoulder. For a moment, the two colors met halfway, and in that shimmer, my father turned. The glass slipped from his hand. It shattered like a gunshot, sharp and final. Silence fell across the room. His smile fractured into disbelief, then anger, the kind that stripped the air of oxygen. No one moved. No one breathed. I stayed still, spine straight, my fingers brushing the badge I had rightfully earned months ago. I hadn't come here to explain myself. I had come to prove something else entirely, that truth doesn't need permission. I grew up in a house by the Virginia coast, where everything gleamed like parade brass. The silver, the photographs, the uniforms, each polished to perfection, as if love itself could be measured by inspection. My father valued discipline more than affection, the Navy more than family, and at least the daughter of his second wife more than the child he'd already raised. When my mother died, I was 12. At her funeral, he stood ramrod straight beside the flag-draped coffin, his voice cold and certain as steel when he said, "A Rostov never breaks formation." 2 years later, he remarried. Slowly, every trace of my mother disappeared from the house. The photo of me graduating from the academy was taken down. Anya's portrait in her officer whites hung in its place. By 22, I left Virginia for Washington and never looked back. I learned that silence could be armor. My father joked that Anya fought storms while I fought spreadsheets, and people laughed. I smiled when they did, though something inside me closed tighter every time. Last spring, I took leave and went home. The house looked the same, trophies of a man who measured love and achievements. I was walking past his office when I heard his voice smooth and confident over the phone. "She'll get the commander board early. I called in some favors. Anya is ready." I froze in the hallway. He wasn't proud. He was plotting, then softer, almost amused. "Mara. She's still doing that computer thing. She's not command material." The words hit harder than any order ever could. I left before the anger could turn into something reckless. Back in my DC apartment, I stood at the window, watching the reflection of city lights on glass towers, cold, distant, efficient. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Your father will never see you until you outrank his pride." I never wanted to surpass him. I only wanted to stand beside him once. But to do that, I would have to break the very legacy he built. Before Anya's promotion was announced, I'd been part of a classified mission in Bahrain, Operation Ghost Hawk. We picked up erratic interference across encrypted channels, a pattern no one else noticed. I traced the signals, layered the data, and realized what it meant. A cyber attack aimed at a U.S. carrier strike group. We had 26 minutes. I rerouted the data, verified the source, and ordered an immediate alert to Fleet Command. On screen, I watched the Roosevelt pivot course just outside the strike window. No fanfare, no applause, only the faint hum of electronics and the steady breathing of the analysts around me. The after-action report was stamped top secret. My medal, the Joint Intelligence Combination, was locked inside a classified file. My father never knew. When I told him I just returned from the Middle East, he laughed proud and dismissive all at once. You always find the safest wars, don't you? 3 days later, the Navy's internal bulletin featured a full-page article. Lieutenant Commander Anya Petrova, exemplary officer in Sea Command, considered for early promotion. Her photo showed her in dress whites beside him beaming beneath the same golden light that had once been promised to me. The date on the caption matched the day I was underground rewrote enemy code that saved hundreds of lives no one would ever know were in danger. That was when the truth set in. He didn't want justice. He wanted an audience. And I, the daughter who worked in silence, would make sure the light finally turned back on him. Last summer, an invitation from my father arrived out of nowhere. His birthday dinner at the house by the Virginia coast. The place that used to feel like home before everything changed. I almost ignored it, but the silence inside me said otherwise. I needed to look him in the eye to make sure the betrayal wasn't just in my head. When I arrived, the party was already in motion. Anya stood at the center of the crowd in a sea blue dress, telling stories to a circle of young officers. The wind almost tore the radar off, she said brightly, but I held my post. Captain said he'd never seen such control. My father laughed, proud, chest lifted. That's my girl, a born commander. Applause scattered like rain. I sat at the end of the table, listening to the ocean instead of the voices. Must have been a small storm, I muttered. His gaze snapped to me hard and cold. Not everything can be understood from behind a screen, Mara. One sentence clean, final cut through the thin thread that still connected us. Later on the pier, I heard his voice through the open window speaking to Captain Varnon, my former instructor. Anya carries my name with pride. Mara's background noise. Brilliant, yes, but she'll never command. The words didn't sting. They clarified. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. A familiar voice startled me. Mara Commander Kirov, a friend from Annapolis, now with Navy administration, stepped beside me. Someone filed an anonymous inquiry about Anya's promotion, he whispered. It was dismissed before it reached the Inspector General. Someone had buried it. Maybe him. Maybe someone protecting him. Kirov's eyes held mine. Be careful. You don't know how deep this goes. That night, I drove away. In the mirror, the house flickered like a distant lighthouse guiding no one. I knew I'd never return as his daughter. The Pentagon after midnight was nothing but hums and screams. My fingers moved automatically across the keyboard as I opened the restricted personnel system. Anya Petrova, her record gleamed perfect ratings, seamless training logs, too perfect. At the bottom of the page, a single line appeared. Waiver approved for Sea Command time requirement. I opened the file, signed Rear Admiral Viktor Rostov. My father hadn't just endorsed her. The metadata told the rest modified via Secure Access Office. Admiral Rostov's private terminal. He'd used his own clearance to rewrite the rules. I saved the evidence, encrypted it, and sat still. The glow of the monitor reflected off the window like a confession. Every framed photo of Anya back home flashed in my mind, each one hanging by a nail made of dishonor. As I shut the system down, the screen flickered once more. A new command line blinked into view. User trace active. Someone inside the same network was watching me. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't the only one hunting. I hadn't seen Admiral Elena Sokolova in nearly 8 years. She'd been my instructor back at Annapolis, the first woman I ever saw command respect without raising her voice. She used to say, leadership isn't loud. It's precise. Her office sat on the third floor of the Pentagon, dim and quiet, carrying the stale scent of coffee. When I laid everything out, the waiver, the logs, the metadata, she didn't look surprised. She just studied me, eyes sharp, and knowing, then finally spoke. He's building Anya to immortalize himself. But you don't need him. That terrifies him. Her words landed heavier than I expected. She leaned back, tapping a finger against the desk. If you report this through Navy HR, it'll vanish before breakfast. You know where it needs to go. Inspector General, I said. Exactly. And anonymously, I left her office with the file pressed to my chest like a live explosive. That night, under the cold glow of my monitor, I logged into the encrypted network and wrote the report. Undue command influence attached evidence request for inquiry. When I hit submit, the screen flickered once. For a moment, I thought I'd done the right thing. By morning, the world had shifted. When I logged back in, my access history was gone. Every trace deleted. The last login system admin priority override. Someone was already watching. I stepped outside, sunlight bouncing off the glass buildings, blinding and sterile. People walked past, coffee in hand, laughing like nothing in the city could ever rot. But I could feel it at the quiet battlefield underneath their shoes. That evening, an unmarked email arrived. 3 words glared back at me. Stop digging. You'll regret it. No sender, no trace, no fear, just confirmation. Someone inside the network was protecting him. I printed the email, folded it neatly, and slid it into my uniform pocket. I'd handled data capable of starting wars. A threat like this wouldn't make me flinch. It only told me what I needed to know. My father was never alone. He was shielded by a web of power, and I had just torn through its first thread. 2 weeks later, a brown envelope landed on my desk. No barcode, no return address, only a name scrolled in blue ink from MC Volkov. I knew it instantly. Master Chief Volkov, my father's right hand during the Baltic campaign in 2002. The man who'd once shown me how to tie a cleat knot on the same pier where my father taught me how to salute. Inside was a faded document. The type barely legible. Section 170-3B. Violation. Command waiver signed under influence. Beneath it, a trembling handwritten line. Victor used to say the Navy was his family. Maybe it's time you remind him what family really means. The evidence was damning, but the ink bled sorrow. Between every line, I could feel the disappointment of a man who once believed in him. I called Volkov through a secure line. His voice cracked faintly over static. Your father was a good man once, but when legacy turns to obsession, even good men forget what they serve. I thanked him. Before hanging up, he added quietly. Be careful. People in power forget how visible they are to those who live in the dark. When I returned to my office, my computer was unlocked. The mouse still warm, nothing missing, yet the encrypted drive flashed a red warning. Copy attempt blocked. Someone had tried to take my files. They failed, but they knew. I locked everything, steadying my breath. This wasn't a family feud anymore. It was counterintelligence. That night, from my apartment, overlooking the PTOAC, the city. Lights shimmered like data lines across the water. I created a backup, labeled it Integrity Archive, and transmitted a copy through a secondary encrypted channel with a single note. If this reaches you, you'll know what to do. The moment I hit send, my phone buzzed. Nice try, Commander. No number, no name, just proof that even encrypted silence had ears. I set the phone down and turned off the lights. Outside, the river glowed the same blue as my screen. I wasn't fighting a man anymore. I was fighting an entire system that taught him to believe he could never be caught. 3 weeks after the logs were erased, a thick ivory envelope arrived, embossed with the Navy crest. The office of Admiral Viktor Rostov cordially invites you to the induction ceremony of Commander Anya Petrova. Same hall, same hour, same lie. Only this time I carried the truth. I arrived late. Through the glass dome of the Washington Navy Yard, I saw the lights, the polished uniforms, the echo of glasses meeting crystal. My father stood beneath the flag's voice, confident and controlled. Tonight we celebrate not only achievement but legacy. Anya earned her command the right way through leadership and honor. Applause rose. I stepped through the doorway, the light catching the silver badge on my shoulder. Conversation stilled, faces turned. I walked straight to the podium, a thin Navy file in my hand. "Good evening, Admiral," I said evenly. He froze, the pride on his face stiffening into shock. "Mara, this isn't the time." It never was. I placed the file before him, opened the first page, and lifted it for all to see. This waiver signed by Rear Admiral Viktor Rostov for Commander Anya Petrova violates Section 170-3B. It is a direct breach of command qualification standards. The silence was absolute. Anya's smile faltered, color draining from her face. My father took one step forward, but I met his eyes. An officer's badge is earned, not gifted. The hall went still. Beyond, the glass waves whispered against the pier. I closed the file, saluted and turned to leave. Behind me came the sharp crash of breaking glass, the sound of legacy shattering. 3 months after the ceremony, I sat in my new office at Fort Mee. The walls still bare, the air smelling faintly of paper and steel. On my desk waited an email from the Inspector General's office. The subject line was short: clinical final inquiry outcome Rostov, R.E. I opened it and read each line slowly, as if the truth needed to be digested carefully this time. Commander Anya Petrova, promotion nullified. Reassigned to administrative post. Admiral Viktor Rostov. Formal letter of censure issued. Early retirement effective immediately. Case closed. No triumph, no satisfaction, just the stillness that comes when balance finally returns. A week later, I was summoned to testify before the promotion board. The panel sat in silence, medals glinting under the fluorescent lights. A general leaned forward, his voice calm, but pointed. "Commander, why didn't you report this earlier?" I took a breath, hands folded on the table. "Because honor doesn't shout, sir. It waits for the right moment." He studied me for a beat, then nodded. "You didn't expose your father. You restored the system he broke." When the hearing ended, I stepped into the corridor. Admiral Sokolova was waiting near the elevators, hands clasped behind her back. She smiled, small, proud, unspoken. "Integrity is the whole game, Mara. You played it right." Outside, the air carried that muted chill between winter and spring. The sky hung low, the kind of gray that made the world feel clean again. Somewhere in the city, a man who once believed legacy was eternal, had just signed his retirement papers. He would keep his medals, his portrait, his history. But he'd lost the one thing he'd built his empire on: his name. I walked across the parking lot, the wind tugging at my coat. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Not because of the rank on my shoulder, but because I had proven that even in a system that worships power, the quiet truth still finds its way through. They promoted me weeks later. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a short message in my inbox. Effective immediately, Commander Mara Rostova, Director of Naval Intelligence Analysis Division. No one clapped. No one needed to. The silence was applause enough. I returned to Virginia Beach in the fall. The air was colder than I remembered, sharper, as if the wind itself had something to say. The scent of salt clung to the sleeves of my dress whites, while gulls cut across the gray horizon in quiet arcs. The house was still there, shuttered and silent, its white paint fading like an old uniform. I didn't go inside. Some places are better left untouched once the echoes have settled. Down by the pier, the same frayed mooring rope was still looped around the post where my father had once taught me to tie it when I was 8. His hand had guided mine, then his voice steady and sure. I could still feel the memory, though now it belonged to someone else's childhood. I sat on the edge of the dock, my shoes just above the water. The bay was calm, a mirror of silver blue stretching into dusk. My reflection looked back at me. Same eyes, same quiet resolve. No new medals, no ceremony ribbons, just the uniform of someone who had done what was right and finally made peace with it. My phone buzzed against the wood. The screen lit up with 5 words that might have once broken me. Mara, we should talk. Dad, for a long time, I stared at it. A year ago, I would have read those words until they blurred, waiting for meaning that would never come. Now, they felt small, an echo of a man who had lost the vocabulary for remorse. I typed slowly, without anger, without triumph. The system works. Then I set the phone beside me and let it go dark. The wind rose gently, carrying the scent of the Atlantic cold and clean. The water rippled with faint light, catching the pink edge of sunset. The same sea that had once witnessed my father's pride, now carried the proof of its undoing. He built a name. I built integrity. One sinks, the other floats. Somewhere beyond the horizon, he was probably sitting in silence, too surrounded by his trophies, learning what it meant to be remembered for the wrong reasons. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't forgive him either. I simply understood him, how the hunger for legacy can hollow a man until he mistakes fear for respect. The tide lapped softly against the pure, rhythmic and patient. Each wave sounded like breath, steady, alive, indifferent. I closed my eyes and listened. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for applause or permission or even closure. The silence itself was enough. When I finally stood, the wind swept through my hair, pulling loose strands across my face. The evening light turned the surface of the water into liquid glass. I looked out one last time, not at the house, but at the horizon that had once terrified me with its emptiness. Now it looked endless, free. This wasn't the place I'd left behind in anger. It was the place I'd returned to with understanding. And somewhere between the hush of the waves and the pale reflection of the sky, I realized what my father never did. That peace isn't granted by rank or applause. It's earned in silence.